Hello to everyone who has already joined. We're just waiting a few minutes until everyone can join from the waiting rooms. So please bear with us. To everyone who's just joined, we will start in a few minutes. We're just waiting to the rest of the participants to join. Okay, I think we've waited a few minutes. That should be sufficient, and then everyone who joins later will follow. So welcome everyone. My name is Sophia Hansen. I'm a junior analyst at Startup Campus, and I welcome you today to this webinar on pitching and storytelling. We have an amazing guest with us, Willy Benkő, who is a specialist and founder, owner, I'm not sure, at Speak Academy, who will present today on pitching and storytelling. So this webinar is part of the V4 Global Export Readiness Programme, which is an acceleration program for 8 selected healthcare startups who receive personal consultations and will participate at an upcoming demo day where they will pitch their ideas in front of international investors and juries. And alongside this program, we have 13 webinar sessions, one of which is here today. Focusing on the European markets, on specific skills that you might need to accelerate into new markets, and just in general, just general skills such as pitching for a startup. So this program is financed by the International Visegrad Fund and is organizing collaborations with 3 partners, DEX Innovation Centre, Startup Hub Poland, and CIVITTA SK, and us, Startup Campus. Just a few housekeeping rules. So today's webinar is going to be recorded and it's going to be uploaded onto our YouTube channels at Startup Campus and shared on our Facebook. So make sure to check that out. And otherwise, if you want to ask questions, you may raise them in the comment section, or there's a Q&A section in this webinar as well. Or I'd say, but really please correct me, you can ask them in person or throughout the presentation as well. So thank you, Willy, for accepting the invitation and joining us here today. And with that, I would like to give the floor to you.
4 years ago, I was invited to attend a session that was held by a multinational corporation here in Budapest. And their CEO opened the event. There were decision makers from 100 different companies. There were members of the government, all in all about 250 people. I don't often get into a room with this much firepower, but there I was amongst all these people with money and influence. The event lasted for 3 hours, and now 4 years later, the only recollection of that event I have is that the fish sandwiches were good. How can you have an event that takes money, time, energy to organize, and then not put the emphasis on the one part of that entire event that will make it more memorable? Is that the goal, to spend 100,000 euros on getting 200 people together so 4 years later they can talk about the quality of the fish sandwich? I'd like to believe that that is not the goal. And just because you have money, you have a big company, you're in a position of making decisions, doesn't automatically guarantee that you will be able to make an impact on the people you need to impact, and that impact will be lasting. I do this as a hobby. I'm a business person. I'm invested in existing companies, healthcare companies, clinic. I've got my own healthcare startup. And I'm also invested in several other startups that are out of the chutes, so to speak. So they're no longer in the running blocks waiting for the start gun to sound. We've got a couple years behind us. We've got a product, we've got paying customers. And just as it is important for a small startup that already has momentum, it's important for a brand new startup with zero momentum that you are able to stitch together your presentation, your pitch in such a way that even after you walk off the stage, whether that's after 2 minutes or 20 minutes, and that you're able to leave something with the listeners. Often it's not the people in the audience, in attendance, that will reach into their pocket and fund your venture. It may be someone they know. And if you're not able to present in such a way that somebody who is uninterested in your product can understand it well enough to pass your message on, then you will have lost the benefit of the multiplicative effect of holding a good presentation. It is said that if I develop myself, I increase my influence. But if I develop others, I help others develop themselves, then I multiply my influence. I'm such a believer in this that I'm willing to take time and effort to pass on what I've learned over the years. Now, regardless of whether it's a healthcare startup or a fintech startup, there are some rules that you need to follow. When you were first learning to ride a bike, I'm assuming without having any access to your childhood, to who your parents were, my gut feel is that your parents likely outfitted your bicycle, the first one you learned to ride, outfitted them with what is called, or what are called, training wheels. You put them on the side of the back wheel on both sides, and those training wheels prevented you, a beginner in bike riding, from tipping over and ending up either hurting yourself or creating an experience that would cause you to never get on a bike again. And then once you start to learn and feel what it's like to ride a bike, most often kids will begin to beg their parents, take the wheels off. I want to be able to do this on my own. And then once the wheels come off, then you're able to lean a little bit more, speed up, slow down, go on the sidewalk, go on the street. It becomes your own style. So what we'll talk about today is intended to be those training wheels. And it may seem a little bit kind of stodgy. Oh, I could put in a little more flexibility or a little bit more of my style. And I'm hoping that you will. But there are things that you will want to do, and we will talk about those things. Because when you're giving a pitch or when you're giving a speech, imagine that you are the director of the orchestra. And as the director of the orchestra, what you're required to do is give signals to the orchestra itself, the different members, on how they are to interact with that piece of music that together you're all presenting for the audience. And you, as the director of your orchestra are the people, are comprised of the people in the audience. And so you, as somebody who's pitching, you need to send subtle signals to the audience members on how you want them to engage with your pitch. Not sending signals will lead to the same challenge that people experience when they step out on the dance floor. So I'm not a good dancer. And if you wanted to dance with me and you were expecting me to lead you, you would come away disappointed. You would step on my shoes. I would step on your shoes. And after one dance, we would both come to the conclusion that we're better off doing this with somebody else. And in the startup world, in the pitch world, that decision will amount to, well, I'm not putting money in that startup. They're not able to engage me. They're not able to get me excited about what I'm wanting. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you do when you are out on the stage is that you, and I'm going to share some slides with you, is the first thing you do, sorry about that, is you don't do anything. So part of what I'm trying to do when I give a presentation is I need to convince the people that I am worth listening to. So I step up on stage, or if it's not a stage, I step out in the middle of the room, and I don't immediately begin by speaking. The very first thing that I do is I assume what is called a power pose, and that is I position my feet as far apart from each other as my shoulders are. And I ensure that I put equal weight on both feet. So I'm not leaning to the left or the right. I'm showing the greatest amount of power by just standing there. My shoulders are pulled back, and I portray the image of a confident person. Once I do that, I'm sending a signal. People, as a general rule, like to listen to confident people. So you've got my initial attention by the way you hold yourself or how you position yourself. Now people are being attracted to you. And from this moment forward, the first thing you say is nothing. So once you've assumed your power position, you then start with a pause. And you do that specifically, not by accident, because as you put a pause into your presentation, the moment that pause starts to grow in length, you will create tension in the audience. Often we're afraid of tension because it's uncomfortable, but going forward, you will need to figure out how to make tension your friend. Tension is a tool. The pause is a tool. And when I create tension, my audience leans in and is even more intent in listening to me. I used to live in Dallas, Texas. And while I lived in Dallas, Texas, I went to a seminar. And after I finished the seminar, I went back to become a teacher assistant in 2 follow-up seminars. And the seminar was run by a person whose name you may, hopefully you do, but if not, no problem, recognize. His name was Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil today owns the talk radio or talk television market in the United States. Dr. Phil is paid a base salary of $90 million a year. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, that's not a lot of money, and I'm not getting out of bed for 90 million. But he's not in that position as some of you might be, and I'm trying to be cute or funny. And he is willing to work for 90 million. They asked him recently, why do you make that much money? And he went on to explain that I am a professional. When it comes to behavior, psychology, motivation, I have a professional opinion. And I will share that opinion with you. Just because my audience may disagree with what I share as my professional opinion, I don't care. I am a professional. By Dr. Phil owning his opinion that the audience may disagree with, he creates tension. The tension draws the viewers to the television set. And with the number of eyeballs sitting in front of the television set being high, many companies are willing to pay top dollar to advertise on his show. And by owning his opinion, he creates tension. The tension draws in the viewer. The number of viewers justifies lots of advertising dollars. Lots of advertising dollars means it's possible to pay him $90 million a year. Now, I'm not assuming that we could immediately step out and own our opinion, but part of the orchestrating the presentation and teaching and sending signals to the audience on how they are to interact with me, I need to make my position clear. So I assume my power pose, then I hold silence, and the silence shouldn't be more than 3 seconds long. And then I open with something that is powerful that it will reflect my opinion or my theory, my understanding of a challenge in the healthcare marketplace that I will solve with my startup idea. And if you're not sure when you open your presentation, if you're not able to send across the level of confidence to the audience that you know what you're talking about and you are unwavering in your opinion as it relates to that particular challenge, then you will be sending the opposite signal to your audience, and they will get the feeling like, he's not very sure. If your goal when you give your presentation is that you want to make the audience your friend, sorry about that, then you're going to fail. And the reason you're going to fail is anytime our goal is to get likes, be loved by more and more people, I will have to change my behavior to do that, because I run the risk of alienating or not getting likes from others. And a human reaction is, oh, I want to be loved by everybody. I want everybody to think that I'm the smartest, the best, the brightest. But doing that will mean you will not create tension. And as a result, you'll be boring and people will tune you out. And never forget that when you give a pitch, you are competing with an electronic device that has the ability to deliver interesting and exciting content nonstop. And if you're not exciting, if you're not engaging, people won't make a big deal about pulling their phone out and scrolling through it. And the intent may be completely innocent. I'll just look at one email. Years ago, when I lived in the US, there was a potato chip called Lay's. Some of you may have tasted it. And they had an advertisement that went as follows: I bet you can't eat just one. And so what that advertising meant for you open up the bag of chips, you reach in, you can't stop at just one. That's what happens when I'm just going to read one email. I'm just going to read one post. But once you got the application open and you see 10 other unanswered emails or 10 other unliked or disliked posts, you feel the urge to quickly engage with those. And you do that, and the speaker will have lost you. Because the speaker has only 7 seconds to grab your attention. So you may not like it. You may, as a teacher or as a parent, say, well, gee, these darn electronic devices. But these electronic devices are our reality in 2021. And so it's easy to blame kids and electronic devices and the world is going to hell. Or it's more difficult, but more effective to prepare my presentation and my pitch in such a way that when it comes down to a competition between me and a smartphone, I win. And when you're able to develop and deliver that level of confidence, then all of a sudden pitching becomes a challenging and an exciting opportunity to share your idea. So we're going to choreograph. The recipe today is about you sending those signals to your audience on how to engage with your presentation. So I start with a 3 seconds of silence, and then I open with something that is extremely powerful. Something that is perhaps shocking. I'm not suggesting that you should say anything that's out of line. Don't use offensive content. Don't use bad words. But make a bold statement about what your presentation is about. One way to do that is when you start your presentation, look for something that is short. I could get up to give a pitch and I can open my presentation with the powerful opening, which doesn't include me introducing myself. Hi, my name is William, and I'm a little bit nervous and I need to pitch about my startup idea. I hope you like it. That is anything but powerful. And you open with that kind of a line and people will pull their phones out and you're going to lose. So you open with something more powerful. 3-second pause. You will die. Now, if you open with the line like that, that will grab people's attention for a couple reasons. Number one, it's 3 words. Not only is it 3 words, it's 3 single syllable words. And it creates curiosity. Now, they may disagree with you, but they'll still be interested in how does he or she have the courage to stand here and make a bold statement like that? So I'm on stage, I'm steady, I've got weight on equal foot, 3-second pause, and I hit him with, you will die. Now, I've got their attention. I start to play with the audience a little bit, and I throw in another pause. Because with the pause, as we talked about earlier, you create tension, and tension draws the people in. If you're taking notes, write this down. If you're not taking notes, write this down. Without tension, there is no attention. So just because there is a momentary feeling of awkwardness in the presentation. That is choreographed awkwardness. And since you're the choreographer, you know what is about to follow. If you don't do this, if you start out too slow, then you run the risk of losing their audience or the attention of the audience. And once they have picked up their phone, you now have an uphill battle to get them back. Now, I don't want to scare you about the audience holding on to their phone, because I like that idea. And the reason I like the audience to have their phone in their hand is I immediately get real-time feedback regarding how I'm doing. If I'm giving a speech to 100 high school students and 15 of those students grab their phone and start to scroll through some kind of content, I just got real-time feedback that I have become boring. I have become less interesting than what's on their phone. Now, one piece of information you don't need to know, you don't have to think in digital terms. This is analog. I'm perfectly fine just seeing that they're looking at their phone. I don't need to know what they're looking at. I don't need to measure myself on a scale. Well, that's a number 32 on a scale of 41, and I'm just a 27. I don't even know how to measure it. All I know is, compared to what's in their hand, I'm not as exciting. And then I have something that I can do. I can change something where I bring the attention of the audience back. One way I brought the attention back is I use something powerful. When you open with a powerful line, you will want to put energy into that opening statement. If I'm standing there and I say, "You will die," then the tonality, the volume of what I just said goes against the potential impact of those three words. And it will not be the words, but it will be how I said the words that will ultimately decide whether or not the audience will listen to me or not. So if I see them grabbing their phones, then I need to put in more energy, put in a pause, move, something that changes. There's a saying that says, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if I continue down the same road that created the disengagement between myself and the audience, then that disengagement will be supported by staying on that path. Don't let your feelings get hurt. Oh my goodness, they're not paying attention to me. They don't like me. Nobody likes me. The world is unfair. You start that kind of internal dialogue, and you'll take any amount of self-confidence and you'll drain it, just like you would a bathtub after a bath. Use your ability. You're not a tree, as they say. You can move. You can change things. You need to be in contact with your audience. So now I've got my audience's attention. I opened with something extremely powerful. I followed it up with another pause. And now I've opened the stage for me to go into the body of my speech. Remember and hold in your mind the thought, "You will die." That was my powerful opening. Then I go into a story. a story is one of those magical tools that grabs people's attention and holds on to it. And it does in such a way that often we are able to recall what happened in a story months or even years later on. I don't know what you look like. I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing that many of you have not recently read the story, The Three Little Pigs. Often when I ask this question, people say 10, 15 years ago is when I last heard it. And then I ask them, what did the first little pig build his house out of? Anybody want to take a guess? You can turn your microphones on. I don't need to see your camera. Krzysztof, Todd, what was the first house built out of by the first little pig?
Wood, maybe?
No, it wasn't the first one.
No, then I don't know.
Anybody else? Agnieszka, what did the first pig build his or her house out of?
It's straw?
Straw, that's right. So the first one was built out of straw. What was the second one? Krzysztof, you said it. What was the second one?
Wood.
Wood. And then what was the third house built out of?
Bricks.
Bricks. Okay, so just out of curiosity, Agnieszka, when is the last time you heard or read this story?
I think 10 years ago.
10 years ago. And without prior information, snapping my finger, and you were able to automatically remember what material they built the first house out of. And then the second, and then the third. So even though 10 years have passed, you didn't forget. And that's the brilliance of a story, that you can hide or build in the important parts of your presentation into the story, because what you need to do when you're giving a pitch is you don't have to sell everything. Your goal is, and then I'll ask another question. So, Lucas, when you go on a first date with somebody, and let's make sure that we keep this clean, but what is your goal during the first date? Is what?
Andre, you can unmute yourself and just, you don't have to raise your hands.
Yeah, I'm supposed to get a second date.
Second date. Exactly. So your goal with this presentation is not to close the deal, is to get the second meeting, the follow-up meeting, the second date. And everything you do needs to combine into you being able to give them enough ammunition, enough input, enough fuel, enough emotion that they will want to go on a second date with you. And the only person from whom in a pitch that can come from is you. So holding out and hoping that they will figure it out on their own, as the saying goes, hope is not a good strategy. So what you want to do is you want to set yourself and them up for victory, for getting to the second date. So if you create a story and put your message inside that story, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a children's story, but it can be. Because if you go back to the Three Little Pigs, the Three Little Pigs, the important parts of that story are hay, wood, and brick. And you can use that as a central message if you wanted to talk about it makes the difference what kind of materials you use to build your company, your product. You can now borrow the kind of materials and say the kind of people that you use to build your company. So you can put your message on the back of that story, and people will be able to recall it a week, a month, a year from now. Now, for a lot of people, they say, that's just too damn much work. I'm busy and I'm important and I don't have time. My attitude is if your speech is not worthy of being remembered a month from now, then your speech is not, or your pitch is not worthy of being given now. So never waste an opportunity to share a story or a message that even though they may not invest in your company, but it will allow them to recall you. And if 2 years from now, Andre, my guess is that if you've exited from this idea and now you're working on the next one, it would be in your best interest. If I see you again, I see you on an invitation to a pitch competition, and I say, I remember that guy from 2 years ago, and by goodness, he had a fantastic message. I was working with a guy from a large bank here in Budapest, and it was UniCredit Bank. And this gentleman, who was the deputy CEO of IT, his responsibility was to get up in front of 1,500 UniCredit employees on a Saturday morning and get up and give them a speech about what IT does. Think about that for a moment, even those of you who feel like you understand IT well. What would you tell the people when you know on one end of the spectrum you have the CEO of the bank, and on the other end of the spectrum you have the person who is responsible for buying toilet paper for the bank branches? You don't get an opportunity to give 1,500 different speeches. You have to give one. So out of curiosity, Martin or Andre, what do you tell the people? What would you say out of curiosity?
I don't know, that's a hard question. I will have to prepare something.
But any idea how you would approach? I mean, what could be the story that that works for all of these people?
I don't know. I have to admit, I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not. It's a very difficult question to ask because the range of knowledge for everybody in the room is really wide. So one thing that you might write down as a piece of advice is facts. So not FAX, but FACTS. Facts tell and stories sell. So his question was, well, do I talk about 5G and Wi-Fi in the branches and download speeds? And we quickly came to the understanding, no. You're going to learn a little bit from Texas. When I lived in Texas, we would not only say no, we would follow up and say not only no, but hell no. So when Alex's question was, do I tell him about these speeds? My answer was not only no, but hell no. You need to create a story that everybody can understand. Now, when I say create, that doesn't mean that you have to sit down and write your own personal children's story. We did the following. He got out on stage. The stage was 30 meters wide with a huge screen. And remember, we talked about power pose, pause, and you need to start with something powerful. So Alex did that, power pose, pause, and then he put the first slide on, and it was a picture of the moon. Would you feel like being at a bank conference day that a picture of the moon would be a powerful start? What do you think? Anybody?
Well, definitely I'll be intrigued what it's going to be about.
Right. So it's a powerful opening, and it grabbed their attention. And then he started with a simple question, and I want you all to answer these questions for me. When did man first step out on the moon? Anybody? I don't see your, I mean, you can Google it, don't Google
1969.
1969, right. So many people knew 1969, their hands were in the air, they were excited, we knew the answer. Then small pause, who was the first person who stepped out on the moon? Anybody, go ahead and answer.
Neil Armstrong.
Neil Armstrong.
It's kind of easy. Yeah.
Okay, that's easy. Little pause, second question. Who was the second person who stepped out on the moon?
Nobody cares.
Nobody knows him. Yeah.
No, many knew. His name was Buzz Aldrin. Not everybody. So as the new question came, less and less people knew. Some people still knew Buzz Aldrin. Then a pause. And then he asked the question, who was the third astronaut who flew all the way to the moon, who was not allowed to leave the command module, without whom there is no moon landing, without whom Armstrong and Aldrin never write their names into the history books? What was the name of that astronaut? Anybody?
No.
Nope. And that's exactly what we expected. Nobody knew it was as quiet as it would be at a funeral. Flip the next slide, and there was a picture of an astronaut in the full outfit with the sign around his neck, Michael Collins. He looked at the audience and he said, his name was Michael Collins. We are the Collins department in the bank. Any question in anybody whether or not the 1,500 people understood what IT does? Andrea, what do you think?
Yeah, well, good message. I suppose everybody understood it. You know,
Everybody
IT,
understood it. Right.
Nothing would work without IT. Yeah.
Right. So you need IT. But if I stand up there on the stage and say, without me, you're not going anywhere. You guys are zeros without IT. That may be true. But if you share the message that way, they will hate you because you elevate yourself above them. In this way, when Alex left the stage, 10 minutes later, the CEO in his speech referred to IT as the Collins department. And 1 year later, when they repeated this all-day event for all of the employees, every person who was at the C level referred to IT as the Collins department. It turned out to be such a powerful message. Everybody got it, and everybody remembered it. Now, in the US, they have an acronym called STAR, S-T-A-R. And what STAR stands for is something to always remember. So as in Alex's case, he had to come up with something that was easy to remember. And if it's easy to remember, then it's likely difficult to forget. And they will carry his message forward. And so the beauty of the story is it allows you to hide your message inside the story. In this case, we chose a story that we didn't have to make up. It corresponded to reality. Most of the people had, if not witnessed, but had heard of the moon landing. And so we had a platform that we could communicate across. We had something in common. But even if it's not the moon landing, we could have done something with the Three Little Pigs or another story. He's not a high school student anymore, but on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, there was a high school student, Jack Andraka, who was 16 years old and loved his uncle. And his uncle was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And within 3 weeks of being diagnosed, he was dead. And Jack loved his uncle. And Jack was hurt by the loss of his uncle. And Jack was like many people who've lost a relative to pancreatic cancer. Jack started asking questions. Why isn't there a quick test for pancreatic cancer? Because there wasn't. And so he sat down as a high school student and he started to Google the whole process. And Jack used that painful moment to motivate him to develop a quick test for pancreatic cancer. Intel ended up giving him money in a contest that he participated in. And it's a real story, his real story, that takes the listener on a line that says, my goodness, here is a young guy who is faced with some kind of input, a problem, a challenge in the healthcare field. Instead of sitting back and wagging his finger in the face of the industry, why doesn't somebody fix this problem? Jack, with his 16 years, takes the tools that he has at hand, his computer, and develops a test. What a powerful story for Jack and for any of you. I have a healthcare startup that I got the idea from the time when I was sitting in the hospital room, connected to an IV and receiving chemotherapy. There are a lot of people who come up or who are forced to go through some kind of unpleasant medical procedure. But it was using that idea that, damn it, I'm going to take this negative experience and I'm going to see if I can flip it on its backside and turn it into something positive for other people. And healthcare is special in this case because healthcare is what is the umbrella under which people pass away, become disabled, become weaker. So it has a high chance of touching all of our lives, either now or in the future. And we can take somebody's pain and turn it into a source of power. I have a friend of mine whose daughter, after a 1.5-year battle with cancer, brain cancer, died. She was 8. A horrible, horrible experience. I didn't go through it. Hope I never have to go through it. Other people, unfortunately, that is part of their reality. And they were strong enough to figure out a way how they could add meaning to the tragedy. Because if they can use this tragedy that they lost their daughter and add meaning to it, then it can be turned into a mission. Then it can be turned into a way of helping other people. And they made a decision after they buried their daughter that we will do what we can to help children who are facing similar challenges. And they created a foundation where, and if you live in Hungary, you're probably familiar with the Magic Lamp Foundation, where they make wishes come true for children who are experiencing a life-threatening disease. And then you get people like me and many other people who use our business contacts to help these wishes come true. And it's a marvelous story because it's got a very sad middle, but it's not as sad of an end because they've taken that and they flipped it. It's a wonderful story. And you need to sell a story. I don't care whether it's a healthcare startup, a fintech startup, you need to have a story that shows me, the listener, how you're connected to this idea. Because if you're not connected at the deepest level in your heart, the only reason you're doing this business is because you want to make money and that's it. That's not a very convincing story. How do I know if your only goal is to make money? How do I know when the business becomes difficult to move forward, when the money starts to run out, when the competitors show up, when people say no? How do I know that you will have the internal energy to keep the business moving forward? Because if I'm going to give you my money, I need to know and feel that you're not going to quit. Because once I give it to you, I don't have much influence over it. So the power of a story, I think, makes sense that, and you don't have to necessarily make something up. So don't make up a disaster that didn't happen, but find what is it in your life that sets you down this path. And then use that to explain why or what you're doing with your startup idea. When you see this little kid, what comes to mind? Anybody, what is he showing? Anybody?
Excitement.
Excitement. So you don't even need to hear what he's saying. You just look at him and you know that he's experiencing excitement. The rule is simple. If you, the speaker, are not excited about what you're talking about, then I, the audience, will also not be excited about what you're talking about. And as a result, I, as an investor, am not good about putting money into business deals that I find boring. At the worst case, if you're boring to me and I put my money in against my best emotions about you that this thing's going to fail, unless you change your style, getting more money down the road will even be more difficult. So you need to get excited. People are afraid to show their emotions. Now, you don't have to, in a pitch, to cry or make something up, but damn it, if you're excited about it, and I would hope you are if this is your idea, that you are able to show that excitement. How would I convey to you, Krzysztof, how do I convey to you that I'm excited about, for example, holding this conversation or this teaching on pitching? What would tell you that I'm excited about it?
Well, you have to be excited. We have to see that you are excited.
Okay, but so you can see me. Can you see me? You can,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Okay, but what else tells you that I'm excited?
Oh, your behavior, your face, your voice, your
My voice.
gestures.
That's right. So it's not enough just to open your mouth real wide as if you're waiting for the dentist to show up. You need to put your whole body into it. And that's what is called meta communication. If you go back and you flip back to the very beginning where I said you need to stand with your weight equally distributed on both feet, not leaning to either side, you are communicating power. If you are in a room, let's say you're a general in an army, and you walk into a room and you've got your shoulders pulled back and you're standing straight, what effect will you likely have on the other people in the room? What do you think they will do? Anybody, Lucas?
Kind of respect. No?
Well, let's say I'm the general and I'm pulled my shoulders back and I'm standing there and you're in that room. What are you going to do?
Oh, pay attention.
You're going to pay attention, but before that, you're going to pull your shoulders back too. So as the speaker, you are setting the tone of how people need to receive you. And that's why it's so very important to stand straight and exude power. And when I'm excited, I show you how you should feel at that part of the presentation. It doesn't even take a mouth this wide open. If you're riding the metro and you're just standing there, you're holding on to something so you don't fall over, and a member of the opposite sex, I don't care if it's the same sex, walks by, doesn't say anything, and smiles at you. What do you normally do?
My back.
That's right. So it's by me doing something, I am now, remember, director of the orchestra, I am now showing, I am modeling for the audience how they need to react. When the audience member gets excited, do they feel that, or does that happen without them realizing what's going on?
Suppose they don't realize it's kind of automatic.
It's automatic, but they'll feel it too. They'll all of a sudden feel like, my goodness, what a fantastic presentation. I'm excited. I understand. I get the message. But that doesn't happen automatically. And if this kid or you or anybody presenting shows up with a frown on their face, not excited, and goes through your presentation and no emotion gets transferred, will they remember your presentation? What do you think?
No, hardly.
Hardly. If they do, they'll remember it because of the negative emotion that it was boring. So you want to be careful that even though you're a really good person and you eat yogurt for breakfast, and you tell the truth, those won't save you if you're boring. So show it. I talk to people and I say, why aren't you? I ask them, are you excited? Yeah, I'm excited. Well, then why the hell don't you send a message to your face? Because I need to see it, and through your voice, I need to feel it. Now, we men tend to have a problem with this. Oh, I can't show my emotions. They won't think I'm serious. I've been involved in businesses that went from 0 to one of them is worth $8 billion today. And I remember clearly when the CEO spoke and shared stories about being a child sitting in front of the TV and for the first time experiencing what it was like when in that case, an American astronaut went to the other side of Earth as they were rotating around the Earth, and the US lost the ability to communicate with one of its citizens. And he said it with such conviction and such ability to get me excited. Is it any wonder that he took an idea, a business idea, and turned it into an $8 billion venture? No. And if we go back to our friends in Texas, they would say, not only no, but hell no. So excitement now doesn't mean we go overboard. And I would not recommend that you use too much excitement at a funeral, but you're all adults. I'm an adult. We know how to pick and choose the venue, but in a pitch, you need to show excitement. Because if you don't, it will not happen automatically. One challenge for a lot of people anytime they speak, and this can be true for somebody giving a pitch, this can be true for a minister, a politician, is they have a difficult time slimming everything down to one message. Oh, my topic is so complicated and so difficult to understand that I need to share all this information. But if you remember what we talked about going on the first date, your goal on a first date is to get to the second date. And my goal with giving a pitch is to get to a second meeting, where likely I will have more time, less competition from the audience, more engagement or interactivity with them. But I need to earn that right. And my invitation into that meeting is my message. Too many messages will not result in more tickets. It's either crystal clear or it's confusing. There's a great speaker in the US, his name is John Maxwell. Written 80 books, spoken all over the world, and the way he phrases it is you need to put the message on the bottom shelf, the message, not the messages, the message on the bottom shelf next to the cookies so everyone has access to it. There are a couple things I'm saying here. Number one, you need to only have one message. And number two, you need to make the message so simple that everybody understands it. Sometimes I've been, 6 months ago, I was asked to work with the doctor. Doctor had an idea, went through the pitch deck with tons of Latin and medical difficult expressions and words. And I looked at him after he went through the pitch and I said, that needs to go in the trash can. And his answer was, people who need to know No. Anybody else who doesn't understand these words, I'm not interested in. And I thought to myself, how could you be so unbelievably arrogant to not take advantage of the fact that if somebody there understands what your pitch is about, they may have an uncle, a brother, a neighbor, a spouse who is in a position or could be in a position to help you. And so my job is to outfit everybody in the audience with what my message is. It's got to be so easy. Now, there's a really ugly word, and I don't use this word except when I talk about it here. And this word is transmogrification. The best way to explain this is using balls. So I've got a tennis ball in my right hand and I throw it to you. And as the ball travels through the air, it turns into a basketball. That process, theoretical process, is described by that word that I mentioned. Now, people will approach this by saying, oh, they'll understand. No, they won't understand. Don't put the burden of trying to figure out what the hell your presentation, your story is about, your message is about. Don't put that burden on the back of your audience. Your audience doesn't want to sit in your presentation and work their butt off. And who are you in a relationship where you don't really know each other? Who are you to put that kind of burden on the listener's shoulders? So make it simple. If you go back to Alex's, his message was real simple. We are the Collins department in the bank. Now, the one interesting that I haven't shared with you, interesting aspect of Alex's speech, was it contained absolutely zero jargon. Not once did he talk about duplexing, multiplexing, Wi-Fi, anything that had to do with the business. Often, if we're a little uncomfortable or we don't have a lot of self-confidence, we'll try to stick in a couple words to convince the audience I'm smart. But if you feel the burden that you need to tell your audience that you're smart, you're not. Margaret Thatcher said, if you need to tell people that you have power, you don't. And the way that you, in a subtle and elegant way, transfer to your audience the concept or the idea that you indeed are smart is by being relaxed and being able to communicate at a level that everybody can understand. What a great message to send to an audience of 1,500, that every one of your opinions matter. What value is that to you if you're in a pitch contest and you're able to share your idea in such a way that everybody in that room understands? And if you're able to do that, I promise you that during a coffee break, when people who haven't met before start to chit-chat, your presentation will come up and they'll say, you know, in Lucas's pitch, it was so easy to understand. I know, I agree. He was thorough. He made it easy. Wow. And people will talk about that because today we're not used to that. Today we're bombarded by all sorts of technical information. And the reason we do that is because of some of the things I mentioned earlier, emotions. Well, I'm kind of scared. I don't have a lot of self-confidence. They might laugh at me. So I'm not putting emotions into this speech, but I'm going to hold on to all these technical expressions so I feel safe going forward. But you in a pitch presentation don't want to create the feeling that you're playing in a safe zone. Because starting a venture, being an entrepreneur, is anything but being safe. And you and I'll have a conversation after you haven't simplified your message, used too many technical terms, and you're going to be disappointed that this stupid audience didn't understand. I was helping some people last week, and they insisted on putting artificial intelligence on their first slide. And I told them, get that the hell out of there. Don't put artificial intelligence into your speech. You don't need to. There are easier ways to explain what happens when you use artificial intelligence. And to compensate for the lack of confidence, the artificial intelligence was there. Don't try to impress me. I was working with a guy who's a university professor. They asked me to listen to his presentation. He needed to give a presentation in front of 25 professor colleagues. He had lived in Germany for 20 years. And his presentation would be his entrance into some kind of group at that university. So on a Friday afternoon, I met with him. His presentation was the following Tuesday. It was just the two of us. We closed the door. He went through half an hour, and I took notes and another page and a third and a fourth, and I have 5 pages of notes. And so when we sat down, he sat down for the feedback. I said, look, I have 5 pages of notes, but I'm not going to give you that much feedback. I'm just going to give you 3 pieces of feedback. Let's be realistic. You got 3 days to make the changes. You're 65 years old. Asking you to change 5 pages worth is not realistic. And so my first recommendation was get excited. Remember the little kid with the expression on his face? Get excited about your topic. I was somewhat surprised that I even had to say this. And then with a serious look on his face, he looked at me and said, I'm not excited about my topic. And I looked at him and I said, well, if you're not excited about your topic and you're not willing to get excited about your topic, then I'm giving you a new piece of advice for point number 2, cancel the Tuesday presentation. Here was a guy who was trying, he was smart, all sorts of collegiate credentials, and yet couldn't handle a few of those little tools that help to convince the other side. I don't want to belabor this point. One message is one message. The nice thing about mathematics is the only exact science. 1 is 1. 1 is not a little bit more than 1 or a little bit less than 3. It's 1. Doesn't get a whole lot simpler than that. How many of you grew up with this cartoon as a child? Do any of you remember this? Lucas?
Yeah, Popeye and the spinach. Yeah, we do remember.
Spinach, right. So tell me what happens. Popeye.
Well, he's always in love with his girlfriend. Then comes the other guy, forgot his name, beats him up. So he has a bit of spinach and beats him back again.
Right. So what happens is he eats the spinach and his muscles grow big, and then he punches out Bluto, and then he can hug olive oil. This is a wonderful example of not selling the spinach. What you sell is not the physical product, it's the result. So I purposely made the picture of Popeye hugging olive oil from the back. I purposely made that bigger than the rest because how you sell this spinach is you first sell spending the rest of your life madly in love with olive oil. And if you want to spend the rest of your life in love, you bought that, then I am willing to bet that you will eat and buy whatever is in that can. So it has nothing to do with the spinach. It has everything to do with the result. If you live in Central Europe and you go to Obi because you want to buy a drill, most people don't want a drill. What do they want? Andre, what does somebody want who buys a drill?
Oh, that's a kind of famous saying. They want a hole.
They want a hole. And if they bought the hole, if that's what they need, that's what the only thing that will make them happy, they'll buy the drill. And too often we get the product ahead of the result. And when you sell the result is when people will start to make buying decisions. I can influence your buying decision by what I tell you. Now that would be, well, I could hold a presentation on that at a different time, but imagine that you're in a clothing store. And I'm the salesperson, I walk up to you and I say, Lucas, what are you looking for? And you say, well, I want to buy a shirt. Okay, so we're at this product level. Lucas walks me over to where the shirts are. Lucas pulls one of the shirts off, holds it up in front of my chest, and he says, you know, you're lucky because with your build, everything looks good on you. What am I going to feel? Lucas, what will I feel after you told me that? Anybody? Maybe Lucas went out shopping for a shirt. Anybody? Andrew, what are you going to feel when I'm the salesperson? I say, you're lucky, sir, because everything looks good on you.
Yeah, I feel good. I get a shirt.
That you do. And now you're going to buy that feeling of I look good. What happens when you buy into the I look good? I'm lucky because everything looks good on me. What will happen then?
I'm satisfied with my
You're
purchase.
satisfied? How many shirts are you going to buy?
It depends how much money I've got, but yeah, I suppose, you know, I'd be willing to spend more.
You will spend more because now all of a sudden you will feel good about the pants, the shirt, the sweater. And all I did was set you up with the feeling. Which one of us wouldn't like to feel complimented that, damn, everything looks good on you? And it's as simple as that, selling the feeling. Love is a feeling. Feeling like you control your destiny. That is a wonderful feeling. People want that and they're willing to spend lots of money on it. You know, ask yourself, I don't know how many of you buy coffee at Starbucks. Anybody? Who would admit to buying coffee, having bought coffee at least once at Starbucks?
Did twice.
Twice, okay. And does Starbucks have the best coffee in the world?
Hell no.
Hell no. And yet, Starbucks, if you look at their market cap, they're worth about $130 billion. So how the hell do you build a $130 billion company without having the best coffee in the world.
Build the brand, build the message. People feel good in the place.
That's right. It's a feeling. Coffee's not their product. The feeling is the experience. You go in there, they smile at you, they wish you a merry or a happy or a good morning. They may wish you Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. They'll purposely misspell your name on the side of the paper cup, and you feel like, wow. And what's crazy about it is if your coffee experience was only about the coffee, then you would walk across the street and go to a grocery store that has a coffee vending machine for 50 euro cents in a plastic cup. You would buy the coffee if it were about the coffee. But you're paying a premium of, let's say, 4.5 euros. Hello. A premium for the experience. And if I don't feel this on the inside, that's an experience. It's going to be difficult to get me involved in that process. So simple message, sell the result. You got to sell the feeling. What will they be able to do once they bought your system, once they use your software? What do you see when you look at this little dog? Anybody?
Kind of seems sad, the picture.
It's a sad picture, but does it make you feel like you would want to hug that dog?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is my favorite kind of a dog. I believe that there is only one type of dog allowed in heaven, and it's a beagle. And a beagle is a wonderful little animal because it's a wonderful analogy. I'll explain that in a second. And the last item that I want you to include in your presentation as you go through your story and you try to compare it, get them to compare it to something that they understand and has a feeling that they can associate with. Imagine I'm trying to sell you a book. And I tell you that this book is just like a beagle puppy. So now there's the analogy. The book is just like the beagle puppy. Easy to pick up and difficult to put down. Do I build a bridge between what I'm trying to sell you and something that I may already be familiar with? I'm pretty sure most people have had some kind of an experience with a little dog. And if you can find a way to take things that we're familiar with, dogs, if you go to the St. Paul Airport in the US in Minnesota, and you get off your plane, as you're walking through the airport, they have dogs that have these little leather covers on them that hang off on both sides. And it says, "Pet me." Because they know that the interaction between a human and a dog leads to a reduction in stress. Before my father died, he was in a hospital in Denver. And what they did in Denver, in that hospital, is they would go down the hallway and would take a green sort of piece of plastic and they would lay it on the bed next to the patient. And then a 1-year-old Labrador dog would walk down the hall and would look into the room. And if the Labrador saw that green piece of plastic, the Labrador would go in that room, jump up onto the plastic, snuggle close to the patient in bed, and let the patient pet them. It was all about a transfer of feelings. And if you look at what we talked about in the last almost 1 hour and 30 minutes, it's being able to adequately transfer those feelings will make it your presentation, your solution, your company to stand out. And if that's the case, then you won't be facing what I face today or what that company faces today 4 years later after spending 100,000 euros on putting together that 200 or 250 person gathering, that 4 years later, the only thing that people in your audience will remember is that the fish sandwiches were good. That is a massive waste of time and money. It's a waste of my time. But just making small adjustments can turn the time that you ask for in return for their attention. It can make such a profound impact that they will remember who you are. They will talk about you to their friends. And you will leave that pitch event having made an entirely different impact and impression. The choice is yours. This is extra work, but everything I shared with you today are things that you do in everyday life. You can put these into your presentation and be remembered, or you can leave them out of your presentation and the fish sandwiches will be remembered. I feel like what I have to say is more important than the experience that a fish sandwich should present to the person consuming it. Small steps, big impact. Put the time in and make the impact. Don't put these steps in, and good luck competing with the fish sandwich. Sophia?
Amazing. I'm actually like in shock with these big like keywords that you use, and I think that's something that everybody should have noted down on it, or at least heard once today and remember them by. So thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you to the audience for sticking with us. Are there any questions, for instance? Let me start with one before, if there's, or there's one. Okay, Agnieszka, please, go ahead. Agnieszka? Can you?
I have one question also.
Oh, Andrea. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. You were saying about, showing that why you are in it, why you are in the company, or why you started for the founders. But what if I'm quite new in the company, even though I'm CEO, but I joined just a few months ago? How am I convinced that I'm here a few months and look, I'm in it for this and this? And
I'm going to give you a kind of cute answer. When you decided to join the company, why did you decide to join the company and not become a pole dancer?
Okay, I got it.
Right? So even if you're not the founder, you, I'm assuming, had all sorts of options. So why this one? Would you, I don't think you're a masochist. You wouldn't want to go work at a company that where people mistreat you, there's no future, you feel unloved. What is it that you felt and now make your own and can share with the audience? Remember the personal experience.
Okay,
Right?
Thanks. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter that I'm new. It's as far as I have something to say about it, and I'm in line with the culture and with the aim and the mission and vision. It's okay.
That's right.
Then I thank you, Andre, for asking a question. I hope you're happy with the answer. So I think something that you said is like personal experience, which I really liked about your presentation, really, is that you introduced us to lots of like personal conversations or just in general, more specific case studies. And with that, my question would be, what was the most memorable opening or a one-liner that you've ever heard that just like, even until today, like sticks in your mind and that you wished that you would have come up with that one?
I'll tell you what the most memorable was, but it's not, even after hearing it, I'm happy to share the speech with it. I heard it 15 years ago, and it was shared by a guy from Transylvania. And he got up to give his speech and he opened with 3 words: I love Ceausescu. And he owned his opinion. And then he ended his speech with, I love, and that's why I can stand here and tell you that I love Ceausescu. And it's a brutal, powerful opening. Even if you immediately, based on 3 words, you have a judgment. You're an idiot, you're stupid, your medicine is not effective, take more medicine, take less medicine, whatever it is. But you still become what? So if somebody said that, Sophia, you hear that, what would you think? He's crazy, but
what is it, brave? He stands out for his opinion.
But do you become more interested or less interested?
Oh no, more interested, definitely.
More interested, that's right.
Definitely.
So he drew you in.
Yeah.
I'm going to share this part. Feel free to cut it out because it's a little bit dramatic. But his mom, when he was 16 years old, told him that I want to make you a cup of coffee or a cup of hot tea on a Saturday morning, and I want to share with you an important piece of information. And so he said, okay, Mom. He sat down in the kitchen and Mom made him some tea, and she said, I want to tell you this because I feel it's important. The reason you're alive today is because Ceausescu outlawed abortions. If Ceausescu doesn't do that, you're not here today. And that's why I can stand here and tell you that I love Ceausescu. Boom, just, I mean, talk about 1-2 punch. 15 years ago, 1-minute speech, can't for the life of me forget.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That's
very powerful, very powerful. And what's interesting about that speech is you start out with the negative, right? He's stupid, an idiot. And 1 minute later, you're thinking, oh my goodness. And you flip.
Yeah.
You need to own your opinion to be able to do that. Okay?
Definitely. Thank you so much for answering. Is there anyone else from the audience, or Willy, is there something like as an ending?
That's it. I hope you enjoyed it. And don't worry about not being able to do everything automatically in the first or the next pitch. It's like learning to drive a car. These are small tools. Use them. The more you use them, the more natural they will become and the better your pitches will be. You don't have to be this much better. All you have to do is be this much better because most people are not improving themselves.
Great. Thank you for that advice. Thank you for your advice and the presentation and to the audience. And I wish everyone a relaxing weekend. And thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye. Bye, Sophia.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.